Welcome to today's episode of the Simply Financial podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Calandra. Got a great episode for you today, and I am confident we could increase your financial IQ. My guest today is Matt Kansy, who I met through my brother. He has over 20 years of experience in the healthcare industry, and he is a regular speaker and a wellness and lifestyle coach. And what we're going to talk about today is the connection between healthy, smart financial decisions and how that integrates with healthy living in general so that you are healthy mind and body. So is that a pretty good introduction, Matt?
Oh, yeah, that sounds fair. Certainly.
So I think the initial question I wanted to ask you, I find this connection very powerful, and I want to get into it a little bit. But first off, would you agree that there is an underestimation out there about how important both are in terms of being connected? They're not separate things. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's my belief.
Because some people focus on, like, I want to build my career, build my business, save money, build wealth, but they keep the health side of things separate. And then other people might live a very healthy lifestyle, but not pay attention to the money side of things. I see that an awful lot.
Yeah, agreed. Certainly. And the thing is it's a disease. It's a social disease of modern day environment that, people just don't really take care of themselves the way they should. A lot of what I do and teach comes from through an ancestral lens of how we evolved and kind of developed on this planet. But in this modern day environment, we find that, through conveniences and processed foods and the luxuries of modern day life, especially here in the United States, has really kind of pulled these rose tinted lenses over our eyes that everything's okay and we can live in this kind of environment without any consequences. And then if for any reason something goes sideways on us from a health perspective, that, there's a pill out there or there's some quick fix, when there really isn't. I have my own personal journey from a health perspective. Even though I'm a registered dietitian, I'm a certified personal trainer, I've been in healthcare for a long time. It wasn't until my own personal health started to fall apart that I realized that my lifestyle choices were the greatest contributors to my overall mental and physical performance, happiness, health, longevity, and so forth. And so when I got introduced to the world of the financial advisor, I became good friends with the president and CEO of a broker dealer. And, I made this offhand comment that you're out there creating security for, the financial security for your clients. And I help secure health futures. Why aren't our industries working together? And we just kind of looked each other in the eye. And that was 7-8 years ago. And it's all I've been doing ever since, is trying to bridge this gap or create this synchronicity of thought between not only securing someone's financial future, but also investing in one's health. And I think both industries really, when you look at it and you pull back and you take a close, a different type of look at it, is that they are very, very, very similar. It's just a matter of just putting them together so that we can maximize our potential, not only financially, but then how do we take that money and put it towards the things that are really matter to us rather than, say, healthcare expenses.
So you speak regularly and you often have large audiences as well as small ones. What is your kind of primary message? What are some of the principles that you want to advance to folks to think about in terms of living a healthier lifestyle?
Sure. Well, there's certainly two ways that I can go about this, with your message that you're getting out to the people who listen to this podcast, is that on an advisor level, it's, just about every advisor also has their own investments. And so it's along the lines of, well, how do you maximize that? And before we started recording, I shared with you a statistic that I learned some years ago that about 20 to 22% of our investment dollars, our retirement dollars, will be spent on healthcare expenses.
Yeah.
And I find that to be an absolute shame, a sham, a shame. And, it's totally avoidable. Now, do I do I have the ability to get that number down to 0? Probably not, but can we change that to 15% or 10%? And each individual's, it's gonna vary. But I find that this to be such an important aspect. But when we look at everybody that's involved in this industry, even down to the client, a lot of what it comes down to, again, is lifestyle perspectives.
Right.
The simple aspects of sleep, nutrition, physical movement. Those are the three things that we do every single day of our life. We move, we eat, we sleep. Now, in addition to that, because of this modern day environment that we find ourselves in, we also have to develop, our own personal stress management strategies, because in this I keep using this term modern day environment, but usually what that includes is alcohol, food, drugs, social media, or some type of distraction technique, and we're not necessarily addressing the root cause. And so when we look at these very fundamentals around sleep, nutrition, and movement, there's something that we can do every day in small doses that can really have a huge impact over time. And so as far as my message to your listeners around this, it's first and foremost, I know that sleep is probably the biggest problem amongst people. I've been doing this long enough, and I've had enough hands raised in front of me when I ask the question, who here in the room sleeps well? I would have to say on average, if there's 100 people in the room, just to make the math easy, at the most I'll get 5 hands, but usually it's only 3 or 4 hands that go up. That tells me that greater than 95% of the room is telling me that, no, I don't sleep well. But yet we spend so much time and energy invested into things like diet and exercise programs, but we know that if we're not sleeping well, that those things, just don't work the way they should, or we have a bigger psychological difficulty engaging in diet and exercise when we're not sleeping well. And so for everybody listening to this, I always start with sleep. And so, and if it's all about the quality first, and then we can expand on the quantity. And there's some very fundamental steps that we can put into place there. It's just a matter of breaking some of these habits that we have, especially in the evening time routine. Most people, when they, end their day, they sit down in front of the TV, they snack on something, maybe they sip on something. And, those are the two things that even though it's relaxing, we're sitting down and we're chilling out, we're actually not investing in ourselves to get the best quality sleep that we can. So that's one of the places that I start with there. And then when it comes to things like nutrition, it's just about, again, it's nutrition. Are you nourishing yourself, or are you feeding yourself? And most people have a tendency to just consume things that they enjoy rather than focusing on the things that they know is going to fuel themselves. And especially for the corporate intellectual athlete, you are what you eat. And then if you kind of neglect that and you don't start the day off right, you're not hydrating properly, and you're putting more refined foods into your body and fried foods and sugars and things like that, then you're actually cutting yourself short as far as the energy needed to perform at your highest level. And then certainly physical activity is one of the things that, and I don't use the word exercise because and anybody that's listening could be exercising every day for an hour or two. That's great. But is that going to necessarily, that's not going to negate the other 8, 10, 12 hours that you're sitting down in front of a screen. And so regular physical movement and standing regularly and just kind of activating the body a little bit more. It's not about burning calories or becoming proficient in an athletic event. It really has to do with, well, first and foremost, if you don't use it, you lose it, right? Most people are dealing with back issues and joint issues and aches and pains and stiffness. And that's because of a lack of mobility and a lack of regular physical activity. But what it really has a profound impact on is our nervous system. And so stress, anxiety, but even cognition, clarity of thought, and mental energy. And so, this is where I spend a lot of my time working with professionals and individuals to kind of optimize their performance through little things throughout the day that kind of add up to have big results. So, yeah.
So that was a great explanation. I have a few follow-up questions. In terms of sleep and nutrition, it seems to me, and this is personal experience as well as observation, is that stress and worry, anxiety often leads to poor sleep and contributes to bad eating habits. Is that a good assessment? Is that pretty common?
Oh, gosh, yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And one of the main reasons that this happens is because when we're not sleeping well and we're dealing with psychological stress, it raises the primary fight-flight stress hormone called cortisol. And when cortisol is elevated in the body, cortisol as a hormone actually demands, since it's a high action fight flight hormone, it actually demands carbohydrate, sugar, glucose, technically, as an energy source in order to function. And so you don't, when we're stressed out and we're not sleeping well, it's impossible to almost burn fat if a goal of a listener is to get out there and exercise and eat well in order to lose weight. But if you're stressed out and not sleeping well, this drive to consume carbs, that's why stress eating, we don't stress eat broccoli and salmon, we stress eat carbs and sugars and potato chips and ice cream and alcohol, simply because that's the demand of the body when it's under that fight flight higher level of cortisol. And so, yeah, it's for the person that's out there that's trying to manage stress and lose weight or just be healthier. The best way to do it is to focus on sleep and stress management. And for people who are just and it's a double-edged sword, right? Or it kind of goes both ways. It's the stress in our life that prevents us from sleeping, but then we don't sleep, and that adds stress to our life. And so this is where we have to start developing healthier, better stress management strategies besides alcohol, food, drugs, and the other things that I mentioned. And one of the best areas that I help my clients with is the 2 times of the day that we most likely have complete control over our life. And that's usually the first few moments after we wake up and those last few moments before we go to bed. What happens during the day is, a bit of a crapshoot. Anything can happen at any moment. And it's kind of emails and phone calls and, different things that happen that we don't have a lot of control over. But if we can spend a little bit of time in the morning establishing a morning routine, either be it a little bit of exercise or breathing or mindfulness or gratitude or, even reading, anything that we can get ourselves in the right mindset in order to prevent stress from occurring. Because most people spend those last moments at the end of the day engaging the things that I already mentioned in order to de-stress. But what if we had a strategy first thing in the morning to help us from getting stressed out to begin with? And so there are some very simple things that we can do in the morning that we can go into the day with a better mindset, a little bit more vitality, and then the ability to develop tools in order to deal with the curveballs that life throws us. And then if we can then finish our day with a healthier pre-bed routine in order to help us get a good night's sleep. Because what we typically do, as I mentioned before, is we sit down, we watch TV, we distract ourselves, and maybe we fall asleep in bed in front of the TV, or we fall asleep on the sofa in front of the TV or in front of the computer. And what we're not doing is we're not addressing ourselves. We're just distracting ourselves from the reality of life. And then as soon as we turn these things off and lay down, life comes back to the forefront. Our mind starts spinning. We start freaking out about what we have to do tomorrow and our finances and our relationships and our business. It's a very complex world. And if you don't invest in yourself, then you're setting yourself up for failure. Everybody, in the business world, they have a business plan and they engage with their clients and they put the client and the business first, but they don't invest in their greatest asset, which is themselves, the corporate athlete. And so if you look at the physical athlete, like in a sports team, be it, you name the sport, you can say baseball or basketball or football. And the truth is that they all have to have their ducks in a row. They sleep well, they're nourished properly, they go through proper training, but they've got coaches to help them through this. The corporate athlete, the financial advisor, they don't necessarily have all these tools available to them. And so they have to invest in themselves in small little chunks here and there in order to build this routine in order for them to optimize their mental and physical performance. Because at the end of the day, when they retire, we don't want 20 to 22% of their money being spent on healthcare expenses. They want, we've worked so hard and invested, so much time and energy into our business in order to grow wealth and assets that then when we get to our retirement age, we don't have the tendency to be had to have the vitality in order to really enjoy it. And so that's why it's my mission to kind of get out there and help the advisor, help the wholesaler, but also the investor,
Right.
in order to kind of take a look at these lifestyle perspectives.
So another, thank you for that. Another follow-up question is you talked about exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And I know exercise gets a lot of credit for having a healthy body, and that is obviously true. but I think it's often understated what that does for your stress reduction and just the mental relief. I try and stay active. I do a pretty good job. I think better than a lot of people. I still can improve. But I find, especially as I get older, Matt, how mentally freeing it is to exercise. And it doesn't even have to be the most intense exercise, you know, a walk on a trail, a walk around the block, just about anything reduces stress. And also, I think importantly, ups the creativity. You know, your subconscious, I think, takes that opportunity to work through problems, think about things that you may not even realize are being worked on, but then they're revealed later when you get back to your desk, when you get back to your pen and paper and start thinking about things. Am I looking at that? Is that true?
Well, I mean, your listeners can't see this, but I'm nodding and smiling in agreement completely with everything that you're saying. And it is so very true. Unplugging and stepping away from the problem and changing your atmosphere and the environment and your thought process, and then coming back to, the conundrums or the issues that you're dealing with, it allows us to take a step back and come back with a fresh set of eyes. And the research clearly shows that. And so some of the aspects of people such as myself, trying to encourage people to get outside, spend time in nature, out in sunlight, that has its own benefits. But to your credit of bringing it up, it also helps us become better problem solvers by stepping away from the problem and then coming back to it. I mean, there's just so many benefits to physical activity and getting outside and working the body. And again, I mentioned earlier that a lot of what I do comes through this ancestral lens. And, if you just go back to the era of Thomas Edison and the electric light bulb, life before that was so different. We walked between 6 and 8 miles a day. 95% of the labor force was physical labor.
Right.
The food that we consumed was natural. It came from local fresh ingredients and a local didn't come from South America, so to speak. And so with the electric light bulb also changing our circadian rhythms, the whole world has changed ever since. But physical activity, we know that around the world, the environments that have the least amount of physical activity have the highest amounts of mental health issues, be it anxiety or depression, and or even cognitive function perspectives when we look at things like neurodegenerative disease like dementia and Alzheimer's. And so physical activity or exercise was once a thing that we did not need to prescribe to. There was no such thing as gyms 100 years ago, unless you were an Olympic athlete. But now as a society, we all need these gyms in order to physically exert ourselves, because it's not only demanding from the standpoint of if you don't use it, you lose it, maintaining muscle mass. But what I find the most important is the nervous system. And the nervous system is just not only dealing with anxiety and stress and depression, but it's also cognitive power, problem solving, word recognition, or acute and mental acuity. Just being able to function on a high level, we need to be physically active. And I learned this lesson personally the most when I did a lot of work with your brother Steve back in the beginning of the pandemic. And he and I were doing between 3 and 5 virtual events a day for almost about 4 months. And it was just crazy, the amount of work we were doing and the amount of stress that was on our plate, because we were developing this program and we're developing resources and information for individuals to help them through this pandemic. And I really quickly realized that I was starting to daydream about that end of the day cocktail myself. It's like, oh man, after this, I'm going to have a martini, or, and I realized that my thought process was actually damaging, my outcome. And because I needed to be the highest performer I could. And the thing is what I started doing was something very simple. I started doing like a maximum set of push-ups or like a 2-minute plank in between sessions. So like pretty much every hour on the hour, maybe about 5 times a day minimum, I would just get on the floor for no more than 2 minutes and either do a maximum set of push-ups or a 2-minute plank. And the physical engagement, I would strain, because planks are really, really good at engaging a lot of the muscles in the body, and large muscles. So I'd be straining myself physically. My heart rate would go up. My respiratory rate would go up. And when I stood up from that, I could literally feel the physical angst that was building up in my body drained away.
Yeah.
Because the truth is that what happens is between the ears, right? The stress, the anxiety, fear, sadness, anger, frustration, whatever it might be, whatever's happening in your brain at an emotional level, the downstream effect is that it affects you physically and the rest of your body. It creates physical tension in our shoulders or wherever we fidget. It changes your heart rate, your respiratory rate, your digestive system, and how well you digest food. And so when we look at things like stress disorders and we equate them to like heart palpitations, and we equate them to digestive issues, we can see this relationship because of fear, anxiety, stress, whatever's happening in the brain. And so by exerting myself in small bouts, small doses throughout the day, therapeutically, I slept better at night. I drank far less alcohol. I was craving less sugary, processed foods. I was happier and nicer to my family. And I felt that my product in my speaking when I was doing these events, it was better. It wasn't forced. It wasn't rushed, and it wasn't stumbling. It was more clarity of thought, and I had more energy behind it. And this is another lesson that I learned many, many, many years ago. And it's a deeper, bigger story. But the truth is that how many people in this world engage with others or give to others from a point of sacrifice, where they feel like they're sacrificing their time and their energy for others in order to keep the wheels turning. But when you invest in yourself, and this was my personal story, is that when I take care of myself, now I'm giving out of excess, so I'm happy to do it. I don't feel like I'm being drained by the people around me that I'm giving my energy to. I feel like I'm being revitalized by that. And so when we invest in ourselves with nutrition and movement and sleep and all these other things I'm talking about, and when you take care of yourself, you can better take care of others. And that could be your clients or your family, your kids, So it's just been an amazing experience for me. And that's why I'm here trying to share it with you guys.
Yeah, so appreciative. The thing I wanted to touch on also is, I wouldn't say that I'm in the healthcare industry, obviously, but something else I've observed over my 30 years as a certified financial planner working with a lot of clients is that when clients have financial security, or they have a plan and they are moving to greater financial security or success, pick your adjective, that adds to peacefulness in their lives and reduces stress and leads to, I believe, healthier outcomes. In contrast, someone that's out of control with money, where they feel like they're falling behind, maybe they are, if they are drowning in debt, if they are just out of control where they don't know where their money is going, all of these kind of different scenarios add to the stress in their lives. And when we work with clients and we help them develop a plan, take inventory, establish goals, put pieces in place to improve what they have now and set them up for longer term success, I feel as though we are contributing to a greater healthy lifestyle, even though it has seemingly nothing to do with nutrition, sleep, nutrition, and movement. Am I just making myself out more noble than is
not
justified?
At all. No, and matter of fact, I love it. I'm actually going to steal some of that in some of my talk, because one of the questions I also ask, besides who here in the room gets good sleep, one of my early questions in my live seminars with financial advisors, I ask who here in the room feels like they're a healthcare provider, and maybe 1 or 2 hands out of 100 will go up. And then I'll reframe their job. I'm like, what do you do for a living? You help secure people's financial future. What is one of the number one forms of stress in our modern day society? Our finances. And so when you do your job and you engage with a client, you help secure their financial future, you're lowering their stress. They're thankful for it. You're helping them sleep better at night. So I ask you again, who here in the room feels like they're a healthcare provider? And then everybody's hands go up.
No, that makes
And so,
complete sense.
yeah, you absolutely nailed it. And I think that I couldn't have said it better than the way that you just described it. As far as from a societal issue, the people who don't have financial security or good investment practices and out of control spending, yeah, then that leads to stress, which then leads to more poor behaviors. Again, it's like a snake consuming itself.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
And so
it's all connected and interrelated.
yeah, wow,
Well, this was great, Matt. I'm so glad you took some time with me. I think this is a fascinating topic, and all of the studies show that Americans are less healthy than before the pandemic, and we weren't even doing that great before the pandemic in terms
yeah,
of obesity, poor eating habits, stress, bad health outcomes, self-harm, destructive behavior. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So this is incredibly important stuff, and it dovetails with the financial part because there are lots and lots of Americans that can improve what they're doing in terms of their financial well-being, making smarter decisions, being more organized, establishing goals. There's a long list there too. So fascinating topic. I know you are in such demand. So thank you for taking a few minutes with me today.
You're very welcome. And I'm just gonna finish on this one last statement here, if you don't mind. It's just like financial investment, is that you don't invest, $100 today and expect it to turn into $1 million overnight or within a month. Investing in your health and well-being is the same. You don't have to take the New Year's resolution approach. You can take a new month's resolution approach. Small investments and small steps, week by week, month by month. A year or two from now, you can be a completely different person. And so just like your financial investments, and that it just takes time, just do the same thing with your personal health investments, and just understand that over time that they will have a better return on that investment over time. So, but thank you, Steve. This is Chris, excuse me. It's so hard not to do that. But thank you, Chris. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Well said. Thank you for listening. Today's episode of the Simply Financial podcast. I'll be back with you on the next episode very soon. In the meanwhile, check out my website, the work I do as a certified financial planner. That's www.elliottwealth.com. Thanks again for listening.
The views expressed are not necessarily the opinion of SagePoint Financial Incorporated and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. No strategy can assure a profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Please note the information being provided is strictly as a courtesy. When you link to any of the websites provided here, you are leaving this website. We make no representation as to the completeness or accuracy of the information provided at these websites, nor is the company liable for any direct or indirect technical or system issues or any consequences arising out of your access to your use of third-party technologies, websites, information, and programs made available through this website. When you access one of these websites, you are leaving our website and assume total responsibility and risk for your use of the websites you are linking to. Securities and advisory services are offered through SagePoint Financial Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC. Insurance services offered through Elliott Wealth Management, LLC, not affiliated with SagePoint Financial.